Let's welcome in the former Lieutenant Governor of New York Post columnist and Newsmax contributor Betsy McCaughey, best-selling author and political analyst Mark Halperin, and former National Press Secretary for the Trump campaign and Press Secretary at the White House, Hogan Gidley. Good morning.
Morning.
Morning. Morning.
All right, so Japan's former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has died after being shot at a campaign event. Mark, I know you have extensive experience in Japan, studying Japanese, living there, speaking to leaders over the year. What kind of legacy does Abe leave behind?
Well, for one thing, he was prime minister twice, including for a very long run at a time when over the last couple of decades, Japan has had prime ministers not last very long. And he really tried to modernize Japan, their economy, their role in the world generally, and their role for their military. I think part of why you're seeing such a international outpour for his assassination is because over that time, he built ties to world leaders. These other prime ministers were there for such a short period of time. They often would not even meet world leaders or meet them only once. Abe was there for so long from a long-standing political family that he really has ties to current and former world leaders. So you've already seen, and you'll continue to see, really heartfelt statements from world leaders, including American presidents, who dealt with him and understood that he really was a force to not just elevate Japan's role, but to work on a lot of international problems.
Yeah, and Mark, from a cultural standpoint in Japan, I had the privilege to live there for a little while myself, and this is not the type of thing, the type of violence that we usually see there, is it?
No, look, the international reaction is one thing. In Japan, there is shock because they have very few acts of political violence, very few acts of gun violence. I think under 20 a year most years in the entire country. So for one of our most important allies, for one of the biggest economies in the world, this is a huge shock, and it will reverberate in that country for a very long time.
All right. And Hogan, you've, of course, former press secretary. Did you have a chance to work with the former prime minister when you were working in the White House?
Did a lot, in fact. Prime Minister Abe was one of my favorites. He and Donald Trump had a very good relationship. They played golf together quite a bit. I remember one time out in Sterling, Virginia, at Donald Trump's property out there. We had a great golf outing, freezing cold. Bryson DeChambeau, the professional golfer, was playing as well. Abe and the president's relationship was always so unique in comparison to other world leaders. They were so friendly on so many fronts, but also they recognized that their countries, were so important on the global stage. They had to work together. I remember a time in Biarritz, France, when Donald Trump had a trade deal set with China. China ended up balking at the last minute. He looked at all of us and said, "Go get me Abe." They bring in Prime Minister Abe. They have a conversation. Basically, what happens is Japan ended up buying all of America's goods that they were going to sell to China. We held an immediate impromptu press conference. They both pulled it off like pros. And it was because they had a personal relationship. They had worked together for so long at this point, and it was a unique ally in Japan that this country had under Donald Trump. And it's no wonder we've seen Donald Trump already comment on this horrific situation in Japan.
We do have President Trump's statement, former President Trump's statement that he shared today. Absolutely devastating news that former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe of Japan, a truly great man and leader, has been shot and is in very serious condition. Now, of course, he put this out even before we learned that the Prime Minister actually had died. He was a true friend of mine and, much more importantly, America. This is a tremendous blow to the wonderful people of Japan who loved and admired him so much. We are all praying for Shinzo and his beautiful family. Again, former President Trump putting out this statement before we learned that Abe had, in fact, passed away. Moving quickly to another very large topic on the international stage, Hogan, I do want to get your take on Boris Johnson. Of course, we know he resigned yesterday under immense pressure as England's prime minister amid a number of scandals.
Yeah, and again, this is one of those things that you kind of look around and say, what next? Because obviously someone like Boris had been a fixture in England for quite some time, obviously a big partner of the United States, probably our best and most strident partner in the world on the global stage. And now, the people of England are wondering, after all the scandals and all the issues surrounding Boris Johnson's tenure, what are they going to do, and how long is Boris going to stay in this particular position? Obviously, they have trigger mechanisms in place to vote for someone new and bring someone else in. But it does create somewhat of a ripple effect and some confusion and concern as it relates to their economy, obviously in England, but also ours here in this country. And the relationship we had with them was one that was extremely strong. And so you wonder where it goes next. I don't think anyone knows yet.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. Of course, the question that everybody is asking today. Now, Boris Johnson, once a chief architect of Brexit, did say this yesterday.
I want you to know how sad I am to be giving up the best job in the world. But them's the breaks.
Betsy, the humor and perhaps wit and whimsy coming through there even during his resignation. What are your thoughts on Boris Johnson and, of course, what comes next?
Well, my thoughts are that although these scandals are the apparent trigger for his departure, in fact, what really brought Boris Johnson down was his policies. England is suffering from huge inflation, over 9%. The pound is down 11% when you live on a little island and suddenly your currency is worth a lot less. Everyone's very upset about that. He was so victorious in pushing through Brexit, but since then, his domestic policies have really wavered. And it appears that in some ways, he's the scapegoat. The Conservative Party wants to hold power. They currently have 80 seats. They don't want to lose their control of the government. So they've whacked Boris Johnson and promised to have another conservative leader in his place. I think this is a strong message to Joe Biden to pay attention to what's happening here in the United States. He can't be deposed the way Boris Johnson was, but a major reason Biden's figures are so low, his poll figures, are inflation, energy prices. In England, for example, electric rates went up 54% in April alone and predicted to go up another 40% next month. The British people just couldn't take it any longer. He ran as a populist but governed as a leftist.
All right. Now we're going to switch gears a little bit here. Running out of time. So, Mark, I'm going to take this right to you. Ukrainian President Zelensky has said he is saddened by Johnson's resignation. Now, I know those two had built quite a rapport over the years. What's your take on that?
Look, the British people are going to have a new prime minister for domestic politics. I disagree with Betsy. I think he lost his job because he lied way too much about too many different controversies. In terms of Ukraine, there's no doubt Boris Johnson was a key architect of the Western alliance in helping Ukraine stand up to Putin. And I think as we look as part of that coalition, as the United States people look at the choice of the next prime minister, there's no doubt that whoever it is, hopefully will have just as much focus as Johnson did on making sure that Britain and Europe in general and the coalition overall are as supportive as possible. But he was symbolically resonant, not just because of his trips to Ukraine, but British military, British intelligence have played a major role, as big as any country but the United States, in buttressing the Ukrainian military effort.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. Thank you so much to all three of you. We're going to see you again at the top of the hour.
Hey, I'm Rob Finnerty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please join the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, too. Hit the bell icon to be alerted to breaking news. And remember, there's a whole lot more on Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news network. Newsmax TV, where real news for real people.